KLDR Online, Leadership Development Radio.
Thank you for joining the Maverick Paradox. And now, here is your host, Judith Germain.
Welcome to the Maverick Paradox at KLDR, where we recognise that effective Maverick leaders are known for their divergent thinking and ability to execute well. Each week, we explore Maverick leadership in all its guises, exploring what it is to be an effective Maverick leader with experts in diverse fields. I'm your host, Judith Germain, passionately enabling individuals, business owners, and organisations to improve their leadership, impact, and influence. Today, I'm joined by Astrid Davies, an executive and team coach and fellow Maverick, supporting her clients to find clarity, focus, and a real drive for success. Welcome, Astrid.
Oh, thank you, Jude. I'm delighted to be here. Really excited to be talking a little bit about some of the underpinnings of that Maverick leadership that you talk about.
Brilliant. So, Astrid, what makes you a Maverick leader?
Independence of thought, often willful, but not totally. Determinedly independent, I think. What I think is useful in leadership and what is useful in the management that underpins it is the ability to put your head above the parapet and be brave and just say, no, I really believe in that project or that outcome, and I'm just going to do what it takes to get there. Now, you don't do it on your own. I'm socialized / misanthropic Maverick, so I don't do the extreme right. To hell with the rest of you, I'm over here. But what I do is bring people with me so that they are part of achieving that Maverick goal too. Spreading the Maverick love.
So if Mavericks are willfully independent people, how does being a Maverick help with your coaching?
Because I'm prepared to bring that bravery into the coaching room. I will always expect my coachees to be brave. In that case, what I'm actually meaning is that they are going to be courageous to face down some of their limiting beliefs. They are going to challenge things that they have held dear for years. They may be right, but I help them re-examine and reframe. And when I'm doing that, I have to put myself out on quite a limb because I am risking their dissatisfaction, their disgruntlement, their just them being a bit discomforted by the whole thing. And I have to be quite prepared to be other. And also because I'm a bit bonkers. And that helps in terms of just making things a bit fun or just coming at something randomly. I don't think that's actually part of my maverickness. I think that's just an innate sort of comedy trait. But there is something about that which gives people permission to just lighten up when they're being coached and not be so hard on themselves and give them fun ways to hold themselves to account rather than the normal kind of, I'm rubbish, I need to do better. As Tony Robbins says, we should all over ourselves. It's that stuff that I seek to avoid with my Maverick coaching.
So do you think Maverick coaches are more challenging than conformist ones?
I don't know. I have had some fairly challenging coaches in my time. As a coach, you need to constantly be honing your skill and being coached yourself. And I would say they've held me to account in a pin me to the wall sort of way, quite well on occasions, and they're pretty conformist. But I think what it does is it gives you the difference. I don't think it's more or less. I just think it's a different perspective.
Okay, great. So what about your leadership journey then? Can you share that with us?
Yeah. It started when I was 22, running a gift shop for some friends. But it was a gift shop in a very busy tourist heritage town, or city, so that it attracted huge amounts of tourists. You had to cope with everything from stock loss in pockets to maximizing your income on days when the tourists weren't in, all sorts of things which are useful for a nipper to learn. I then went off and did a graduate scheme milk ground stuff after uni. And that was where I was recruited to be the Oxford Street graduate for the Burton Group. Debenhams at that time was all owned by the Burton Group. I am that old. And then I moved on to, my first degree was a bit of a nightmare. My second degree, I decided that I'd go back, and all the jobs that I wanted in Monday's Guardian were information. So I went back and got a master's in information and knowledge management. And at that point, I then had the chance to move industries and move into the property industry, and worked for a lovely firm, and made my way up through the ranks just by innovation. It's the Maverick thing. I joined as an oppo, but because I was bringing in ideas and because I was pushing boundaries constantly, they were thinking, there's something about her. And so after a while, I was promoted to an associate partner, and I was the youngest associate partner that they'd ever had who was not a fee earner.
So that's really interesting. So what did you have to face being the youngest partner, associate partner?
I have to say up front, I have never, ever faced outright misogyny, largely because I'm a fairly forceful character, and I don't think people thought that they would give it a try. But I was completely serious about that. I am a pretty passionate workforce feminist, and I really wouldn't have had any truck with that. But as I say, I was lucky and I haven't had that. And I think it is luck. I don't think it's to do with me being forceful, because that implies that people who aren't that lucky aren't that forceful, and some of them are. It depends on the circumstance. What I did find was that I faced a little bit of, well, you don't really understand. You're not from our world. Now, that could have meant that they didn't think that I'd gone to an independent school. I did. I might not be bright enough. I was. So we had those conversations really early. I mean, obviously not my schooling, but I would explain things to them very clearly, basically mansplain back to men. And that worked quite well, because I made myself learn quite a lot of the investment formulae and all the other things, because I was the librarian. So I'm a chartered librarian. That's what I did as part of my master's. And so I was going back as their business information. And to be honest, I was sealing their deals for them. And they got to know that I could be useful. And then as I grew a team, that our team could be useful as a result of that.
Brilliant. Thank you.
Where that went afterwards was into the public sector. And I went private to public. And then I had a big bulk of my career in the public sector. And that was very different. That was where I was pushing boundaries where other people were pushing different boundaries, because the public sector is massively innovative, because it has to be to make ends meet. And so you'd find that you were having ideas, and then other people would be having ideas over here. And my day, every day, was synergizing other people's ideas into mine so that we could mutually save costs and give the residents better service. And that's a head mess, frankly. After 20 years, I stopped.
But it's a good skill to have, to be able to innovate from two disparate things and to synergize it into one. Could you tell me, what do you think is the most interesting thing about the overlap between management and leadership?
If I'm being truthful and a bit naughty, I would say that management gets a bad rap, and as a result, the overlap is massively misunderstood and underestimated. You don't have to be a good leader totally to be a competent manager. Mm-hmm. But I dare any leader to have a go at competence in their leadership role, maverick or not, and not be a competent manager. Because if you don't know what you need to know, and then you don't know the stuff you need to know, you can't lead, because you won't bring people with you. And that's the piece. A leader can only lead if there are people willing to be led. Mm. Whereas a manager is organizing things. I love the origins of the word. Management comes from Old French, and that comes from the Latin manu agere, which is literally to lead by the hand. Now, we don't think of management as leading by the hand. That would be seen as terribly old-fashioned these days. Sadly, we think more of management in kind of 1970s and 80s, kind of clipboard wielding and looking at people over their glasses like I'm having to because I have strange focal length. This is much more, I think, the opportunity to explore that crossover area as a massive area of learning and of development for individuals all around a situation. So it is the manager themselves, they develop hugely and develop leadership skills. But if they are a competent manager, my evaluation of competent, they would be able to share and spread those skills. So there is greater diversity of the skill set, and it's better spread out around the team.
So is leadership, in your perspective, then a higher skill than management, or just a different skill?
I would argue that it is a furtherance of the skills. It is operating management at a more strategic level. That's how I would define it. But I don't necessarily think that's better, worse, bigger, lesser. I think management, as I say, has got a bad rap. I think that it is so important to know what you need to know, and then to deliver the stuff you need to deliver. And you can be this inspirational leader off over the hills and far away, but if you actually look around and there's no one following you, then something's gone wrong. And that's normally sits in the communication and often in the management communication.
So I guess it's probably fair to say that all good leaders are good managers, but not all good managers are going to be good leaders.
Yeah. I think there is an expectation that it's mutual, or that management is somehow the precursor to leadership in terms of a progression. Well, it is in terms of personal development and skill set, but it doesn't have to be in terms of career. The point I would make is that leadership often means that you can rely on managers who don't particularly want to do the strategic. They love doing the do. And if they have absolutely superb skills doing the do, let them do it. Let them thrive and excel in that environment. Don't constantly pressure them to be a leader as some form of promotion. I don't hold with that as a, I think that is a misguided concept. And I would also say that it's why an awful lot of people in a leadership position in business across UK PLC, particularly in the professions, are in the wrong job, because they've been promoted because they're a good surveyor. They may be rubbish with people. I do other things that in my work that cater for that. But there are some things about them being able to do the management bit and understand what effective management involves, that I think build their competency set to a level where they are enabled to be to strategize in your world and to innovate, and they can lead the execution to pinch your strapline. They don't have to do the execution because they know that they've got managers they can trust and that they are held in similar esteem.
Yeah, I think that's really interesting, because I was just thinking about my first management role, and it was interesting in the sense that I was 24. I'd gone into a new career from the one that I was in before, and was a HR manager over two retail stores, 1,000 employees. But I was a senior leader responsible for running the stores if needed to be and managing the other senior managers. And it was interesting what you were saying, because for me, getting into that role was not a promotion from management. It was, you've shown a level of competency. Yeah. So now you're a senior leader. Go on with it.
But
Which was interesting.
Obviously in preparation for this, I was looking up definitions, and I love the definition. I mean, it's very wordy, the one in the Cambridge Online Dictionary, but the one in Webster's is really, really simple. The act or the art of managing. And I love that because I think that it is undersold as an art form. I don't mean as in creative arts necessarily, although obviously in some circles it can be. There is an overlap. But there is a skill set that if you get it right, can be so fluent and so competent that it raises everybody's game. High-performing teams are made by managers. They may be made by leaders who are good managers, but they are made through the management of that team. It isn't just about shared purpose and shared goal and empowering your team and all the other things that we associate with leadership, and we can tick them off as a checklist. I would argue that the art is the organization, the coordination, the communication, and that's huge.
It's interesting because you're making me confront my own opinions, and I'm just trying to assess them. Because I've always looked at it and I thought that management is obviously there's a people element, but it's primarily over task and outcomes, and leadership involves that, but also the alignment and the inspiration of people. So it's a bit more. It's probably people applied to task. I'm thinking out loud here, but that's where I'm thinking the difference between the two.
I think that's a really interesting definition. It's a bit like the sort of the DISC, people and task differentiations. I would suggest that management is organisation, deployment, goal setting, monitoring, and review. Okay, and all of that is delivery. But that has got to be task, and as you rightly say, deployment of all your resources, people included, to deliver the task. It may be that leadership is not necessarily about task so much as about outcome, maybe. In other words, there has to be some impact from the management. It's pointless doing it if there's no impact or if there's an adverse impact. The first rule, do no harm. But I would suggest also that leaders are the folk that are excellent managers that are then able to take a strategic vision and deliver an extraordinary impact, a positive impact, make a difference that answers the famous so what question with something that folk couldn't have got just with the deployment and the measuring and the monitoring.
Yeah, I think for me, I'm loving this conversation, by the way, because it's making me really think. I think for me, leaders is about the strategic direction, especially Maverick leaders, and managers are more concerned of the strategic plan.
Yeah, there is. I think I would fear for any leader who thought that they only had to do the plan and didn't have to have delivery to back it up.
Oh,
but
of course,
they may not be the people who are doing it.
Yeah. Brilliant. Thank you for that, Astrid. You really made me think, and that is always a joy. I think it's time for our break now, but when we return, we will talk about Management 101.
Each week, Judith Germain welcomes onto the Maverick Paradox podcast a guest to explore what it is to be a maverick, a willfully independent person, and to discover effective modes of leadership. Her guests are experts drawn from all walks of life, discussing how their area of specialism, or how they think, demonstrates maverick leadership or behaviour. The Maverick Paradox podcast is a relaxed conversation with guests where they show that maverick thinking encompasses all aspects of our working lives. Judith's podcast is amongst the global top 10% most popular shows in the world and can be found on popular podcast platforms.
Thank you for joining the Maverick Paradox at KLDR, where we explore maverick leadership in all its guises. This is the station for the pathologically curious who want to be challenged by divergent thinkers. I am your host, Judith Germain, and today I'm joined by Astrid Davies. Astrid, there's lots going on about leadership, but management underpins all of that, which is what we were discussing earlier. So how can you be a maverick and still be the one doing the monitoring, performing, and goal setting?
Well, I think that's really quite straightforward, because it is about being open to new ideas, open to challenge, being able to innovate and measure stuff in a different way. I'll give you for instance. Quite a few years ago, I was part of a national project, and my team were represented the Southeast on a national project that was for government at the time, looking at the development of how you measure impact of social activity and community-based activity and creative activity when it's those really hard to measure impact kind of things. And so the work became what is now available on the Arts Council website as a generic social outcome. But that's fantastic. We were able to measure just through a mum and bub session in a local library levels of social cohesion, social isolation, preparedness to tackle illiteracy, just by asking people to fill in and answer specific questions and then using that. So that's it. I think that's an innovative way of getting the so what question answered in a really nice way. Though of that exercise, 90% met people who they thought were new to them. And of that 90%, 58% were going to keep in touch with that new person as a result of that one meeting. So you know, it's fantastic metrics, but it's a bit out there. And I think just it's what I was saying earlier, bravery, just being prepared to have a go.
So to be brave, what's your relationship with failure?
Well, in disc speak, I'm a very high C, so not great, not on first name terms. But that's me. My team, so long as we've had no surprises, then what I would suggest is that failure comes about because I haven't helped them to do the right thing, or I haven't enabled or supported them to do the right thing, or it's a massive foul up by someone. And if it's a massive foul up, you know, Marshall Goldsmith put out a piece last week in his newsletter, which was really interesting because it was about, you know, why do we scapegoat people? If there's no one there to blame, we don't blame anyone. We say it's bad luck. So why do it then? And I think there is a bit of maverickness about saying, okay, we take that on the chin. That is a collective. We have failed. We need to do this differently, and take someone to one side privately and say, you know, what you didn't deliver X, Y, and Z. This is what we need. How would you do it differently next time? And, you know, support them as well as the coaching piece. But as I say, you know, I've been out of direct management for quite a while. And all of my leadership roles have been leadership and management at some level. They've all been together. So maybe that colours my view.
You know what? You pose such a great question about why do we scapegoat? Because I'm thinking of all the effective maverick leaders I know, not one of them scapegoat somebody else, because from their perspective, what's the point? What's the point? It doesn't get you anywhere, does it?
Exactly.
So why do
what it does is make the person who's the mitherer feel a bit better.
Yeah.
And what's that about? You know, I think the maverickness is the I'm over this. We've moved on. Now, that if it's where I fouled up, that can take me a while. But if it's not me, then I am much, much better at that, because you just have to learn. You know the plan, do, review cycle that people associate with management. I have a different take on that. I just think you have plan, do, review, learn, plan better, do better, review better, and learn better. And that keeps going. It's an iterative sort of rolling spiral, I guess. Because if we are not using, as Mavericks, if we're not using that innate skill to, frankly, not give a stuff when about the small stuff, I do not possess the book, Don't Sweat the Small Stuff, but I quite like its mantra, right? That bit about it's tiddy little things and they're eating away at your soul. Who is benefiting from that? And no one is frequently that answer. If we are to be competent leaders and managers, and how I support my clients is, what are they for? That's the question I often ask them. What are you for? What are you there for? Anyone they give me their job title or their job.
Yeah.
What are you for?
I think that I like that. I'm just loving this conversation, Astrid. It reminds me of all the core identity stuff that I do. And it's, what is your purpose? What is the proposition that you're doing? And that's, how are you showing up? Why are you doing the thing that you're doing? Because we've all made a conscious choice, regardless of your role. You've chosen to do that role in that particular organization, in that particular culture. Yeah. So there has to be a reason for that. And it surprises me that people don't reflect on that when they want to make a change, rather than, my boss is rubbish. So
I think that takes bravery, and I think that's the problem.
I think also that effective maverick leaders are very pragmatic. So even if there's something's gone wrong, and that they're all in that learning realization. So what did we learn? How are we going to do better? They're not interested in assigning blame, especially in the moment of the thing going wrong. I mean, blaming is a complete waste of time, because you have to fix the thing that's gone wrong. So you need to know what happened, why did it happen, what did we learn from that, what are the things we can do to move forward. And that takes a pragmatic stance before you fix the thing, and then you reflect back and say, okay, what has to be learned? What needs to be done now? Does that person need to be spoken to? And that could be some sort of performance conversation, or it could be dare I say, a cuddle conversation where you're like, it's okay, it's my fault. I didn't check that you knew what you were doing when I gave you the task. Because ultimately I'm the manager, right? I'm the leader. So it's my responsibility when it goes wrong. It just means I didn't check enough. When I delegated it to you, I didn't check you knew what you were doing. That's my fault. Yeah.
I think there is a slippery slope there, which is it's not you, it's me. That stuff. Because
do you know any Mavericks that would actually let that happen, though?
not Mavericks, but we don't populate the entire world yet. I think that there are some folk who would use that, it's my fault, to diffuse a situation because they don't mean it, is what I'm saying.
Good catch.
I think there is, a need to find out what happened, and blame will inevitably get attached like a leech to someone who's part of that conversation, right? Our job is to check the leech is not on any vital vein or artery, and then after that leave it there for a bit, sort the situation, come back, remove the leech. What worries me is when I see folk trying to be pragmatic, but the place is burning down. No. We're not needing the kind of, the situational leadership curve when we're up here in sort of selling, and no, we're telling. And sometimes I think the maverick in us will dial up that extreme maverick. It'll dial down the socialized stuff because we just need to JDI it. There is something about impetus that I think mavericks can bring, but I think that needs to be tempered. I really do.
Okay, that's good. And I'll thank you for catching that. You're right. So what do new managers need to know and demonstrate? So maybe in their first 90 days, what do they need to do?
They need to get to know their resources.
Ah, good one.
And so their resources are, time, space, technology, people, I would argue.
Mm-hmm.
And the cash that underpins all of that. So they need to know what's expected of them, what their deadlines are, what their regular cycle of delivery needs to be. They need to know where they've got to do that and what technology there is that underpins that to make that slicker. And they don't start on the second week, I can a different CRM system would be, none of that. Learn, observe, absorb, notice what you notice. My favorite verb in coaching, notice, right? Understand what's going on for the people. Get to know them, let them get to know you, and understand what your budget is and what it's likely to be next year. What it was last year, completely irrelevant. What it is this year and what it's going to be next year is often, particularly in the current climate, attention focusing. And the Chartered Management Institute put out a report back end of 2020, which was a really interesting review. I mean, it was a massive research project, actually, of management in a time of COVID. And I recommend anybody listening to this to get hold of that at management.org.uk. And they came up with some fantastic key findings about management and how management has been tested. But I think one of the key points of all the research, and they came out with loads of findings, and I can bore for England on the subject because there's a lot of it and I love it. But one of the things that I would say that is crucial for a new manager, Maverick or otherwise, is to start with trust. Build trust. Earn trust, not expect or demand it. And that element of trust is huge in management, just as it's huge in leadership. And if folk understand where they are in all of those contexts, I think that they're well on the way in their first 90 days. And there are ways they can do it, and there's metrics that they can use, and there's templates, and you can use. I'm a big fan of a template, as you know. But there's often a useful thing in your first 90 days in a job when you're taking on particularly new management. I always encourage people to just keep a record of what they're up to and what they're noticing, what people are saying to them, who's smiling, who's not, how much things cost, did things take longer, less time, I don't mean keep a little black book of stuff, just make a point of it, note it down, write it down somewhere on a sheet of paper if you really need to, but just remember. And then when you get to your first period of review, because 90 days is normally beyond most people's probation period, if it's a 2-month or maybe 3-month probation period, you're actually in a position to go into your probationary review with stats. And I would always urge people who are new in job to have stats with which to counter anything, particularly if we've got employers who are trying the constructive dismissal nonsense.
You know what? I like that. I like the idea about making sure you've got stats to back up what you're doing. I think that's a very useful thing to do. And as well as building trust. And another thing I probably would add in, certainly when I was responsible for new managers coming into an organisation, is to get them to do an appreciation in the different departments so that they really understood what took place and the challenges of those departments. And I think if it's something that can't be physically done, to do it by meeting the managers of those departments and asking the right questions. Because I think every manager needs to know how the organisation is run and what is their peers going through and struggling through, because otherwise how can you work together as a team?
I absolutely applaud that addition. Yes, absolutely. I think, it's the fundamental of most of the old milk round grad schemes is you got plomped into one department, then another, and then another. I mean, I was lucky. I got plonked straight into one of the biggest Yves Saint Laurent franchises in London. So I was quite lucky. But measuring gentlemen all day, that's a tough first gig. But in all seriousness, I was constantly asked, and what have you learned today? Yeah. My managers there were just brilliant. So what have you learned today? What have you learned today? And it was a mantra. And it would always, and it wouldn't just be, that the lift's broken and, or that the canteen's a bit naff, or it would be what stock levels, and, there would be an expectation. Again, the monitoring isn't just about the task. The monitoring is of the people. Now, that isn't clipboard wielding and looking down their nose at people. It is checking in, making sure they know what's going on for that person, making sure that as the manager, you're responsible for other people's development, making sure you will deliver on that development. And I love that. We always talk about smart or smarter goals. Specific, measurable, achievable, realistic, time-bound, ethical, and recorded. Great. That becomes like your second skin when you're a manager, and you know that you need all of that level of detail for every decision you make. But when you're learning those first 90 days, when you're absorbing all that information, when you're going around and appreciating all that every part of your organization can offer, it's sometimes quite difficult to remember it. Certainly folk tend to forget to write it down, or they lose a deadline, or, one of the bits of smarter falls down. And that's okay once, maybe twice. But learn, review, learn, do it better next time.
Yeah, and that's great because it develops an awareness of other things and a great habit of always reflecting back on what you do and what others do in terms of what can be learned, because that's the first part of innovating. So that's fantastic. So another great conversation, Astrid. When we return from our break, I understand that Astrid has a few questions for me. So I am very interested to see what she's going to ask.
The Maverick Paradox. Judith Germain is an author, speaker, consultant, mentor and trainer, and the leading authority on Maverick Leadership. She is the founder of the Maverick Paradox, which supports organizations to enhance their leadership capabilities and to help business owners develop and grow their businesses. Judith enables individuals, business owners, and organizations to improve their impact and influence. She is also HR Zone's leadership columnist, an international online radio host, and her expert opinion has appeared in national, international, and trade press.
Thank you for coming back to the Maverick Paradox at KLDR, where we stoke your curiosity on all things Maverick. So, Astrid, what questions do you have for me?
Well, Jude, I've got 3 questions that I think help open up a little bit more about that Maverick management dialogue that we've had earlier in the program. First question for you. We've already talked about the importance of trust in the first 90 days, trust for a new manager, trust for an old manager, trust for a leader. It's a key tenet of management and leadership. How does a Maverick leader and manager build and retain trust?
I think one of the most important things that Maverick leaders have is that their sense of integrity. So that's integrity in 2 things. So integrity in terms of the wholeness, so a roundness of everything, so it's a holistic view, and also the integrity from a sort of a character perspective, where you're trusted and engendered trust. Maverick leaders are courageous enough to be transparent. So if they're asking you to do something, they're explaining why and why it's important. If they're upset about something, they're telling you why they're upset. They're not trying to hide from you. So I can give you an example. It's interesting. When I was in HR, quite often you have a dual role. So you're responsible for the organisation's whole and the organisation's interests, and you're responsible for the employee interests. And some people really do struggle to see how you can make that work in both areas. And sometimes you might have an employee that's making a complaint against a manager, for example. So the employee's trusting you to do the right thing. And then when you're discussing with the manager what's happened, the manager's trusting that you are going to do the right thing. So you're not trying to get one over on any one of the parties. And I think that was a great way for me. I think that I was demonstrating trust, that both groups felt comfortable to know that I would do the right thing. So a manager would disclose exactly what happened, knowing that I would do the right thing rather than not tell me, because they're more concerned about the consequences that would happen to them. Does that answer your question?
That's lovely. I particularly love that holistic and a dual use of integrity, because it's all the nuances of that word, in terms of its wholeness, in terms of the sort of moral fiber piece as well. No, that's lovely. Thank you, because that really resonated with me. Thank you, Jude.
Oh, thank you.
Are you ready for your next question?
I am.
Hurrah. What are the key traits of a maverick manager? We've already done integrity. You've got ahead of me on that one. And courage, we've got that one as well.
Okay. I would say that Maverick leaders whines. Now, I love an acronym. So the W is for a willful intention. So a Maverick leader will do what they think there needs to be done. They're determined to get that thing done. And if you don't agree, but they believe it's the right thing, they'll do it anyway. Also, they have an honest belief. So what they're doing, they honestly believe it's the right thing to do. So whenever people feel challenged, they just need to ask that Maverick leader, what is it that you're thinking? Why do you believe that this needs to happen? Because a Maverick leader will tell you. They're not going to hide their intention. The I is for influential. All Mavericks are influential without meaning to do anything other than that they are. So a good Maverick leader will be very aware that their words and their actions has a lot of weight. So they'll be careful how they wield that influence. Now, N, I've done a bit of a sneak because I've got N as knowledgeable. So I've made the case in my acronym there. But I think the knowledge is twofold. So it's not just they know the subject that they're doing, but they also know what sits around it. So for example, like when I was in HR, I was knowledgeable in HR, but that's to be expected. And then I looked at the organisation and said, well, what do I need to know? Well, I need to see how ops is working. So I know so I can help the operational running. So then I got to know ops extremely well. And then it's like, oh, so what's sales doing? So just, your expertise becomes broad, but it also remains quite deep. And that's where the knowledge of a Maverick leader goes. The E is for execution output driven. So Maverick leaders are not talkers, i.e. that if they can't see that the thing is going to be executed well, or the solution is going to solve what it's set out to solve, they're just not starting the work. So some people can see that really challenging, because when they've thought through the problem, if what you're saying is going to solve the problem and it doesn't, they're just not going to start. So that can be quite difficult for people. And the S is success. Mavericks love success. So they want to achieve, they want to make it done, and they want to be able to see that. So for Maverick leaders, the excitement is the successful execution of something, not just the figuring it out.
That's really interesting. So the way you've just explained that, Wines works for Maverick leaders and managers. Yeah. Because I heard a lot of monitoring in there, a lot of observation, a lot of working with and through your people, a lot of communication, all the management traits for leadership, and vice versa, which is great. Thank you for making my argument of earlier in the show. Marvelous. My last question what is the Maverick take on, or your expert Maverick take on my plan, do, review, learn, plan better or different, do better or different, etc.?
I think when I see people following the Deming cycle and derivatives of that, they tend to actually do it. And I think that's a bit weird, because what I mean is that a Maverick leader imagines it before they do it. So they go through the whole of the cycle before they actually take action. And if anything doesn't seem to work, then they'll fix that, go back and run it again before they start. So again, it can be quite irritating in meetings if the Maverick leader hasn't explained what they're doing, because most people reach the point when that's a great idea, let's do it. Well, the Maverick's going, hang on a second, if we implemented that though, how is that going to fix the problem? How's that going to work? And that can be seen as really challenging. So I think Maverick leaders run through their imagination and their reasoning the cycle first. See if it makes sense, if it's going to work. Tinker with it if it isn't. Then before they're about to do it, they plan's probably not. They consider what would failure look like. So what are the failure points? And if it's going to fail, is that a good failure? Can we live with that? Can we move on from that? Oh, we can't? Right, let's start again in this cycle. So that what they're doing is de-risking the risk before they begin. So everybody says that Maverick leaders are really risk takers. They are risk takers for acceptable risk. So that's why they're asking so many questions. That's why they're so challenging, because they're de-risking the risk. Yeah. So they reach a point where they go, yeah, that's fine. And if it doesn't work, that's okay, because I have an alternative. So let's go. And then they'll actually do the thing that you're planning, the whole plan review, the process that you have. And then when they've done that, they go, okay, what did we learn? What went well? What would I do differently? And that's probably the part of the process that I see most leaders refusing to do, because they're more excited about implementing or strategizing or getting that done. Whereas I say, Maverick leaders, it's about integrity, it's the wholeness. We had a hypothesis, because I suppose Maverick leaders see the world in a collection of hypotheses. I have a hypothesis. I wonder what would happen if this happened. Yeah. And then they test it and see. And therefore, if they're right or they're wrong, it almost doesn't matter, because they now know. Do you know what I mean?
Yeah. And the satisfaction is in the knowledge, in the knowing.
Yeah. So you're not ego-driven. You're not attached. So if somebody comes, I've got a great plan, and I'll tell you about it, and you go, yeah, Jude, but you know what? If you just did this, I'd be like, really? I wouldn't be upset with going, this is the plan and this is what I want to do. I'd be like, whoa, you saved me from getting it wrong. That's great. Let's do your plan. Your plan's way better than my plan.
Yeah, that's fantastic. I really love that. Thank you for such an intriguing and informative answer, because I really enjoy that kind of plan review. It's like the Disney thing, it's the Disney project management model, isn't it? So you look at fabulous idea, then you critique it, then you see whether it's going to work, and you go round and round again. And that is really, I think, quite crucial to successful project delivery. And it doesn't have to be capital P project, Prince or whatever, like my world. It can just be delivering the thing, getting the thing done, and whatever the thing is, enabling folk to understand that when they're doing it, they know that it is a much safer delivery, that it's going to have fewer hurdles, fewer headaches, and probably going to cost less. And that, I really like that. And that builds into the Office of Project Management stuff at the White House. They do a lovely cycle, which is planning, monitoring, developing, rating, and then rewarding. We haven't even got on to the how you motivate people piece. That's a whole other conversation. But there is something for me there about them building that in, that you're monitoring and reviewing twice in that cycle, which I think is crucial. Don't know what happened a few years ago, but they, other than that, they use that to deliver projects, across the piece, and that is across any administration. And I think bringing those two bits together of the doing, but the why, you were going back to your purpose thing earlier, really powerful. Thank you, Jude.
Thank you. Oh, thank you. I think that's why Maverick leaders have more success. It's because they plan better, but their planning, I don't know of any Maverick leader that has pages and pages of plans. They have this is strategic direction. These are the milestones that I need to hit to reach my strategic direction. And then they leave the very detailed part to emerge. And they're very comfortable because they know they're good at what they do. They know they can deal with what comes up as long as they hit this defined milestones.
Yeah.
So, Astrid, my turn. A couple of questions for you. Thank you for the questions, by the way, making me think. Do you have any leadership hacks or lessons that you could share with the audience?
I think that there's a couple that I can share just as reminders. One is, if you're getting hung up on your leadership journey, bear in mind that you've got to be able to do the management piece first, because no one is going to follow you if they don't trust you to organize, deploy, monitor, and basically know what you're doing.
Mm.
And another one is, I think it was Drucker who said, what matters gets measured or something. I'm not comfortable with that, because then you get price of everything, value of nothing, which I hate.
Yes, I agree.
But there is something about when you measure things, be innovative and inspired when you measure. Go back to my point about measuring impact. See how you can get metrics and numbers and measurements and reviews out of the soft stuff. How happy are your people? How listened to do your people feel? We are talking an online form. Others are available, and you just give people a 0 to 10 or 0 to 5 scale, and people have to tell you how they're feeling on a quarterly basis against a set of criteria. Really simple. I sell products that do that, but managers can do it themselves with a spreadsheet or an online survey if they feel the wish. But checking in so that you're asking about internal impact within the organization. I cannot stress how important that is.
I think that's a really good lesson, and it annoys me actually, the whole kind of if you can't measure it, then it's not important, because so many things then don't get looked at, and those things are the people things, and it's just ridiculous. And my view has always been, well, we manage by exception. So if, for example, you want someone to have a better attitude, so especially like in retail, quite one of the things is like the person hasn't got the right attitude. Well, you can't measure attitude, but you can measure complaints or or whatever. So it just takes to innovate it, and so you just look to say, what is the outcome I want? I want somebody who is great at customer service. That's the outcome. So what do I need to make that outcome happen? Mm-hmm. And I just think people give up. If it feels like it's too hard to measure, they give up. And also, measuring isn't just, as you said before, it isn't just the numbers. Yeah. There's this whole load of other things other than the numbers. I remember working in an organisation where there was a senior manager who was extremely good in practically every metric. It was fantastic. But there was an issue to do with how his staff, it was really weird because the staff weren't reacting to him very well, but he was a really good people person. So it was really odd. So I suggested that I would, and I was new in role there, so I had that kind of a bit, who is this person? I suggested that I would turn up to one of his meetings and be the note taker. So I would just be the note taker and I would just observe the meeting. And he had his meeting, and then when he was gone, when I was giving feedback, I said, "Oh, that's really interesting because you obviously have issues with this person, this person, this person." And he was like, "Yeah, how do you know that?" I was like, "Oh, because every time you spoke, they did this, or they looked at each other here, or so it was all that kind of stuff that he hadn't, the dynamics between people he hadn't thought of observing, as it were. So it was really easy to make some adjustments based on just observing the dynamics of the team when together and when they're not together.
And that's a lovely example, Jude, of why the manager isn't, I don't do hero leadership and I don't do hero management as ideal concept. If a manager is trying to find out stuff, get the neutral observer in, get someone you trust to come in and be that sounding board. Beautiful example, and so rarely done. Courage again. But, and also people's preparedness to speak truth to power can sometimes be a bit of a challenge. But if you have that, as you showed, that manager learned so much more, and his leadership toolkit will have expanded as a result.
Yeah, brilliant. Thank you, Astrid, for joining us today. It has been such a fun conversation. And thank you for joining the Maverick Paradox at KLDR, where we recognise that effective Maverick leaders are known for their divergent thinking and ability to execute well. I am your host, Judith Germain, and I was joined today by Astrid Davies, an executive and team coach, fellow Maverick, supporting their clients to find clarity, focus, and a real drive for success.
You can find out more about Astrid by checking out her website, AstridDaviesConsulting.com. So that's AstridDavies consulting.com. Her articles on the Maverick Paradox magazine, and you can also find her on LinkedIn. See you all next week.
Thank you for joining the Maverick Paradox.
Only on KLDR Online Leadership Development Radio.
You can follow Judith on her fan page at Judith Germain.